Hey, welcome. Today's date, 4th of December. It's December 2024. Let's chat with Matt. Hopefully I'm in the right group, Bright Light Beings group, and here to talk for about half an hour or so with anything you might want to know. I don't have a lot of input put in pre coming on. Doug wrote in his normal cryptic whatever, cipher. Hey, Sister Karen. We have to all pray to stop the spray at poison of our precious earth, air, and sea. Spread the love, attitude of gratitude, co-creating Gaia's Garden of Eden, permaculture by design. Back to the garden. Yeah, I agree. We have to stop spraying shit on our food. oh yeah. Spraying poisons basically, and the use of petroleum-based or artificial fertilizers and various other agents that we apply to the ground and to the plants, because it's not healthy. It's not healthy for us. It's not healthy for the planet. It's not healthy for the continuation of agriculture either. So yeah, and the use of various modified plants or organisms that don't replicate, don't self-seed, etc. Crazy, all in the name of corporatization, making big profits, and taking the power away from the common people, the farmers, the common people who can no longer easily grow food without these huge inputs, because they've successfully and successively degraded the land and degraded the plant population to the point where we can't grow it now without a huge amount of inputs, and they are the only supplier of said inputs. So they've successfully put us over a barrel, and that has to stop somehow. It's going to be interesting to see how it stops. I do believe it will stop one way or another. It's going to be interesting to see how. Of course, there is a grassroots movement of people who are choosing to grow their own food with more heritage-like seeds and organic principles. There is a small number of farmers turning to more organic and regenerative farming techniques and supplying food of much higher nutritional value and quality. But it's still in its very small infancy, and compared to the vast majority of how our what we call food is produced on the planet, it's still a drop in the ocean. So we just, as Doug said, we have to all pray. And for me, prayer is not a sort of a subjugation to a higher power that it's going to help fix this problem, but it's a real setting of intention that I'm going to advocate for the outcome that I desire, with how I spend my money, with what I talk about, with what I personally do as best that I can. We could all do better, and we could all do less better. We're all on a road to putting our money where our mouth is, so to speak, and that's how it is. But the important thing, I believe, is to really be aware that there is an issue, and be aware that you have power with your intent and with your actions, and not to get all stressed about it, and then feel that you have to fight, because fighting doesn't really work. We have to advocate, which is a far more powerful pathway forward. Anyways, it's a real thing. It is a very, very real thing, and it's probably one of the biggest threats that faces our survival as a human race. I know a lot of people are worried about climate change. I know a lot of people are worried about war. I know a lot of people are worried about economics and overpopulation. But really, the quality of the soil on the planet is really one of the most critical, if not the most critical, issue that we currently face. Because once that topsoil is gone, we are well and truly in a lot of trouble. And it's getting eroded and degraded very, very quickly with modern farming practices. tillage, etc., and the use of synthetics to successfully kill off all of the microbiome and the biodiversity within the soil, rendering the soil very sterile and infertile, really, to doing anything other than holding the roots of a, synthetically fertilized and completely looked after version of plant life that is very, very low then in nutritional value, because it hasn't been nurtured properly in proper soil with proper microbiome, etc. Anywho's, looks like a plant, quite often looks better than what we would grow organically in terms of its form and colour, but it's a subterfuge, it's a ruse, it's not, it doesn't equate to the nutritional value just because it looks pretty. And of course, such plants are very, very fragile and easily wiped out by a small disturbance in their expected pathway of development. In other words, they don't have much resilience. These modern modified crops, they're completely reliant on things going the way on the schedule that they're predisposed to in terms of application of fertilizer, applications of pesticides, etc. Anywho's, we can all make choices about what we're eating and what we're spending our money on, and whether we're gardening or not, and to what degree, etc. What else, my friends? What else? We've come through yet another new moon at the start of the month, right on pretty much December 1st. It was, I think for me, it might have been 30th November for the Americas. But so we're in a new lunar cycle as we close out this calendar year. Close out this calendar year and run into Christmas. Trust you all had a tolerable Thanksgiving holidays, for those of you in the Americas, or in the United States anyway. And you're making good choices with how you invest your energy. Again, it's our choice, right? We can invest our energy in protest. We can invest our energy in fear-based thoughts and concerns and worry, or we can choose to invest our energy in being the best version of ourselves given the current situation that we're in, which is always, what's the right word? Evolving. The situation we're in is always evolving. And so, hey, Sister Mary. And so there's a continuation of available choice, right? We're never at a conclusion point where nothing can change from here, or it's all lost. There is always opportunity for progress to be made. Therefore, you are always at choice as to what you do in your next moment. The last few moments might have been really uncomfortable, but the next moments can be better. And comfort is an interesting metric that we use. We're very keen as humans to use this metric of comfort as an indication of whether we are good or not. How are you? Yeah, I'm good. Basically meaning I'm comfortable. And interestingly, we get comfortable in more and more shitty situations. It seems, we get habituated. Comfortable is basically around whether you feel safe. And people are starting to feel safe in very interesting circumstance. I find it interesting anyway, that people are choosing to be okay with calamity. In some ways it's good, and it shows some form of resilience. I think we're all more resilient than we make out. What would once have been horrendous for us, several decades ago, is now quite acceptable, because we've shifted our bar of what's acceptable through habituation. slowly and slowly being more and more exposed to situations. So this is natural and normal. And it's not necessarily all bad that we are comfortable in these situations. But the problem with most humans, or most of us most of the time, is that when we're comfortable, we are not likely to change anything. So, bit of the devil, if it ain't broken, don't fix it mentality, don't poke the hornet's nest, is very true of humans. And so we've become comfortable in all sorts of situations of discordance, really. And then we allow it to continue. And while I was just advocating that I was just use the word advocate when I want to use it again. That's annoying. I was just indicating, probably a better word, that it's not so useful to fight against things, but more important to advocate for things, to advocate for the outcome we want, as opposed to fight against the outcome that we don't want or don't like. It's important that we're willing to act outside our habituation to achieve that, right? Advocation requires actions, and some of those actions are not going to be comfortable to take because they are different from what we have normally taken, habitually taken, or are expected to take by others. And so to advocate for different outcomes, if you keep doing the same thing, you'll keep getting the same outcome. And if we keep behaving the same way, waiting for things to change from some sort of magical occurrence or some sort of top-down change, the government's going to come in, Trump's going to save us all. No, that's not how change is going to happen. Change is going to happen from the grassroots up. And if we don't advocate for change by changing our attitude, changing our actions, and changing our expectations of what's appropriate and what's not, then things aren't going to change, right? The world will always meet us where we're at. And so we've been slowly degraded into lower and lower expectations, and the world has gone with us to meet us there in providing situations for us to really express ourselves as a spiritual being having a human experience. It's getting, less and less opportunity to do that on the planet in general, in many ways, because of society's pre-programming to expect a very low grade of autonomy and sovereignty, and to accept, a very disempowered relationship with authority. And that has to change, in my opinion, for us to really embrace a new society, a new culture where we celebrate our individuality and we work in community collaboratively rather than submissively. And so to achieve that, we need to be willing. Yeah, Mary, I think that's true. Mary said we're accepting a lack of accountability in leadership. And I think we're also putting too much emphasis on leadership as expected to be accountable. I think the problem is that we have far broader a base and far too pointy a top at the moment. And this idea of leadership is there's such a small minority of people in quote unquote leadership positions. They're put on a pedestal and almost destined to fail, and then we all accept that they fail because we've watched them fail successively time and time again, because they're in an impossible position, really. The idea of, these single leaders or small groups of people making massive decisions for a huge population, I think is ludicrous. I think we're accepting a lack of accountability in ourselves, and that is being reflected onto our leaders. No one's taking accountability for actually living their own life in a sovereign way, and they're expecting our leadership to do it. And then when our leadership fails, while everyone boo hisses, you know, how much accountability can we really put on them? How can one person look after, 100 million or more, 1,000 million in some cases in different countries? It's very lazy, and we've been educated into this. This is the system that's been built around it. It's no one person's particular lacking or fault. It's a system that's been built around us to create a disempowered version of life, really, where we don't take accountability for ourselves and we don't self-govern. We're expected other people to make all of the rules that then we wonder why they don't suit each of us, and we wonder why we can't express our individualness within this system. And it seems to be getting worse and worse. It's getting worse and worse because it has to change. It has to change. So, and while people are accepting less and less accountability within themselves, accountable for their own happiness, they want to project it onto the leadership, then with that lack of accountability within themselves, of course, that's going to reflect out into the fact that they're now not really expecting a lot of accountability in anyone, because, if you can't expect it in yourself, then, how can you, in good faith, expect it in others? Of course, some people jump up and down and put all of the problems on the external world and don't introspect. But a lot of people are in some way aware, and some way very was why depression is so big at the moment, is a lot of people are aware that they are, have achieved this non-accountability and non-participation really in the world, in themselves, and so that's what's being reflected out around them. They know they're not happy, and yet they don't know how to achieve it. They feel very hopeless in this because they've been slowly but surely, even the thought that there's an option for them to find happiness in themselves has been taken away. And so a lot of people are aware that they're not happy, and they look around them and go, there's not much. It doesn't look like the world is going to provide my happiness, and so that's depressing when you don't feel you have the power to make any changes in your world, or at least in your experience of the world. That's the point. I think a lot of people we've been successively educated into believing the world is very real, very absolute. And so, 1 + 1 = 2, and it always will, and that's how it is. And so if the world looks like this, this, and this, then I can't be happy, right? It's an equation. It's a simple exchange of if then. If it's like this, then this is the result. And they don't realize that the world is far more subjective and a lot less absolute than we make out. And individually, we can make the best out of a lot of situations and find all sorts of levels and layers of happiness within that. Even though the situation is not perfect, right? We can have a relatively joyful experience of that situation based on our own choice on how we perceive it, how we interact with it, and what our own intentional objectives are in living our life. A lot of us have become very righteous as humans, and if things aren't right, then things are obviously wrong, and if things are wrong, we can't be happy until we fix the wrongness. Makes sense, right? Makes sense if we were all robots. But the point is, this right and wrong are again programs. They're just ideas. They're not reality. And so we're all looking out and seeing, we all spend a lot of our time judging the world around us and recognizing what's wrong and what could be better and what needs to be fixed. And it creates a lot of stress in us, and it creates a lot of lack of happiness. And it creates a lot of hopelessness as well, because a lot of the things that we see are wrong, we can't see obvious solution to it, right? In logical terms, how do we fix the climate or the erosion of the arable agricultural soils? How do we fix these problems where it seems like there are much, much bigger, more powerful entities controlling the narrative and the situation? These pharmaceutical companies and the same people owning the pharmaceutical companies, the food production systems, and the media outlets, advertising situations, all, very, very effectively degrading the health of the human race, right? By advertising shit food, feeding shit food, advertising the solution in pharmaceuticals, providing the pharmaceutical solution to eating shit food, which then creates more and more side effects, which there are now more pharmaceutical interventions for. And so people are just on this route where they're fed shit food from the get-go, use ineffective methods for trying to manage the symptoms of eating shit food, get sicker and sicker, and consume more and more of these said, agents of pharmaceuticals. Of course, a few surgeries thrown in there to deal with inflammation and how it's affected the body, the joints, etc. You look at that and you go, well, it's just stuffed. And it seems like there's such a massive entity driving that machine forward. And yet when you get out in the community and start talking to people, you realize more and more people are waking up to it. More and more people are taking accountability and action for themselves and choosing not to eat so much shit food and starting to grow some of their own food and starting to look at more natural healthcare alternatives to managing their bodies and their health and their peace of mind. And more and more people are coming to yoga and doing meditation and looking at other spiritual practices to help them feel better about themselves, rather than eating crappy, sugar-laden, chemically degraded food, what we call food, which is a term we use loosely these days, this thing called food. People consume this stuff, but a lot of it isn't really nutritious. And so it's just a filler that makes people feel good for a moment. Anyway, so how does all of that change? It does when we each and individually change our perspective and advocate for it, not necessarily having to stand on a soapbox or go out in the street protest or make huge, massive, radical changes in our lives, although we can. There's nothing wrong with making radical changes in our life and completely going off-grid and completely going organic and completely... That's fine if it works for you, but it doesn't have to necessarily be that black and white, either this or that. Slow, steady progression generally gets the majority of the people to the outcome most of the time, right? What we tend to see in all forms of transformation is people who make big radical changes quite often can't sustain them. And so they make a big radical change with a lot of hurrah, and then they fall off the wagon and end up back where they were. Whereas generally, and these are generalizations, it doesn't happen to everyone, generally people who make more slow, steady progress towards change find that it happens more sustainably. And while they do have slipbacks, of course, the slipbacks aren't as catastrophic and they can keep progressing forward. And so generally, we quite often have a catchphrase. I have quite a few catchphrases, like what you resist persists. But another catchphrase is consistency beats intensity, right? Consistency beats intensity. The consistency of change beats intensity of change. So quite often I tell people, meditate for 10 minutes a day rather than try and meditate for 2 hours once a week. 10 minutes a day is only 70 minutes a week. 2 hours would be 120 minutes. But you'll get much, much better benefit to your life if you do 10 minutes a day, right, which is only 70 minutes investment, rather than trying to do 2 hours on the weekend, which is a 120-minute investment. But because you do it in closer and closer increments, smaller amounts in closer increments, actually has a much more cumulative effect of creating change or creating improvement, rather than big chunks sporadically or at further distance apart, right? Consistency. So with our intent, right? So how often you remember your intention, the more consistent you are, right? So if you remember it 5 times a day, just for 30 seconds at a time, again, better than spending 10 minutes in the morning doing a whole heap of affirmations that then you don't touch again for the next 24 hours, right? If you spread it out, you get much better results in general. So I can't remember what brought me to this. I'm going to try and read what you wrote. Mary said, I find peace only when I connect with my true essence. Feels like the trappings of the world are really falling away and seem very empty. Yeah. And of course, what you're calling peace now and what you call your true essence now will also continue to evolve. I agree. The trappings of the world are falling away for very many people quite naturally. And they are being drawn into this experience that you describe, finding peace only when I connect with my true essence, in finding a deeper peace within themselves, finding a deeper acceptance, finding a more meaning in their life in an internal experience rather than this external what's the right word I was trying to use, the word where we're completely mesmerized by something. But we have been successfully trained into looking to the external world to provide our happiness, and looking to the external world to potentially where our threats are going to come from. So we keep looking out there for signs of threat and signs of savior, and hoping and wanting that things are going to come from out there. Our opportunities are going to come from out there, and our threats are going to come from out there. Therefore, our whole attention needs to be out there. And this has been a very successful strategy in keeping people disconnected from themselves, and therefore not really able to connect to one another. Because if you're disconnected from yourself, you can't really have deep relationship and connection from each other, and therefore our communities have fragmented, and therefore we're all divided and divisive, and therefore we're easy to control, right? Because no one feels the solidarity of our community, and therefore the very small minority who sit at the top of the pyramid have had an easier time in creating the situations that they want, right? These authoritarian, rule-based control mechanisms that they're trying to intensify even right now as we speak, trying to create more and more of this sort of digital technocracy, if you like, and control of people, right? Keeping people divided and afraid and monitored, right? And when you monitor people, of course they feel afraid because they don't feel that they can do anything. Even once we're all monitored, if we all choose to do the wrong thing, what are they going to do? That's the point, right? If there's solidarity, and I'm not a communist preaching, to the comrades here, but I know the word solidarity has been misaligned. But when we all choose or when a large group of us choose to act together, there's very little that the authorities can do to subdue us. This is the point, right? And this is why they've put so much effort into keeping us disconnected, and what's the right word? When distracted, right? So lots of media, lots of various games and entertainment and drinking and all of this stuff keeps us distracted from knowing the essence of ourself, and therefore knowing the essence of our brethren, our brothers and sisters, our community around us. And so we don't connect to ourselves, we don't connect to other people. Everything's very superficial on this level of ideas, right? That we can then create more and more division around, oh, you believe that, I believe this. I go for the blue team, you go for the red team, we're at odds, or we both go for the blue team, therefore we can be friends, but at a very superficial level, because we're only going to talk about the blue team stuff, right? And I'm not talking about politics, I was actually talking about baseball, but it's the same, right? I don't know what the blue team is in baseball, but basketball or football, it doesn't matter, right? This level of distraction is what's being used to keep people from truly communing with one another, and therefore having a sense of deep connection with one another, so that we are willing to act together in more, in more unity. The understanding of our unity is our strength, and we don't need to in any way sacrifice our individuality in maintaining that unity. That's the guts of it. That's where New Earth is going, if you like. I don't really like the term New Earth, but that's this new epoch of energy that's emerging, is encouraging us to find this deeper sense of unity within community, and still very much celebrate individuality and uniqueness. We don't need to sacrifice our individual expression in order to fit in anymore. And so that's exciting. But as Mary Louise just pointed out, it's going to come through choosing to spend more time connecting with a deeper aspect of self, whatever you want to call that. And that can happen in a variety of ways. It doesn't need to be, sitting in front of an altar, meditating for hours on end, although it can. It can be doing all sorts of different things, playing music, walking in nature. But in general, it's about taking the senses inward, and being less influenced by the projections of the few, right? Media, entertainment, all of that stuff, right? Get out into nature, stare at some trees if you're looking for something to look at, or watch the birds or the squirrels or the whatevers, right? But breathe with it, breathe into it, breathe into life. Or if you don't have that option to get into the forests or the mountains or the ocean, then, do some art, or play some music, or move your body, or meditate, connect with spirit in some way, some form, to advocate for our desired outcome of a more equitable and peaceful and joyful place to live. We have to embody it for ourselves internally first, right? All change is going to come from within, and that's a job for each of us individually, and not one that any particular leader can fix for us, right? It's going to come through a spreading out from one-to-one contact with people, inspiring and supporting each other. So if you go find some peace in yourself, then inspire one or two others to do it, 3 or 4 others to do it, and they go and do the same. It travels very, very quickly through our society. Very, very quickly. That's all that's required. We don't need leaders to fix things. We will have leadership of sorts, of course, but it's going to be far less centralized in the future, and far more collaborative in nature, and far less politically driven, and consumerist driven and capitalist driven. Not that money's bad or wrong, not that making money's bad or wrong. It's just that, we've got to a situation where making money has become the highest endeavor, and people have gone to great lengths to really capitalize on making money to the expense of just about everything else, societal relation and the health of our planet. So that's what it will change, from the grassroots up, not from the top down. Mary wrote in, nature teaches us so much too. I like slowing down for sure. As I walk on the beach today, I got to watch a seal happily bobbing around. So beautiful. Yeah, exactly. When you watch nature and animals and even the smallest creatures and the largest creatures, you recognize that they're not nearly as interested in what interests humans, right? And so life is so much simpler and therefore much less stressful for the animal kingdom and much more enjoyable. They get to really experience their existence in ways that is divine, because they haven't been manipulated into a mentality that has created so much stress and therefore so much disintegration, right? Where we're not so integrated, and distracted from the truth of ourselves and disintegrated into parts that seem to be at conflict a lot of the time. Anyways, I've done my half hour, my friends, so I will wrap it up there. Thank you very much, Mary, for partnering in the conversation and inspiring the topic. I think I can't remember how it started, to be honest, but anyway, I appreciate your input. Much love to you all. I will speak to you again soon. Bye for now.